the background to today's session is that for many years, I've been very comfortable in the C-suite and talking to CEOs and C-level people. And for a long time, I've been saying that when it comes certainly to ERP implementations, but any major business system implementation that's transverse and cross-cutting and touches the whole enterprise, the owner of that view of the business is the chief executive. So therefore, the only person who can be the custodian of such a far-reaching project is in fact the CEO. And according to my experience of investigating over 30 failed and suboptimal ERP implementations, where you don't have what I call CEO custody, and custody is much stronger than sponsorship, you end up with problems because you don't have that holistic high-level view of the enterprise, and you're skewed to finance or you're skewed to IT or whatever the case may be. So I got into a discussion with somebody on LinkedIn a few months ago, and he was complaining about a situation. I said to him, the reason you're having a problem is because you don't have CEO custody. And he said, well, kind of, what do you mean? I said, what I've just shared here. And he said, well, what do you do if you don't have CEO custody? I said, you walk away. He said, if I did that, I wouldn't have any business. So I said, oh, okay, that's the point. And it dawned on me that in actual fact, the majority of practitioners do not know how to operate at that level. They don't know how to start a conversation at that level. They don't know how to even get the doors open at that level. And that's what gave rise to this session today, is to say, right, let's have a discussion around how do you escalate a project to the C-suite and particularly to the CEO. What are the sorts of things that you should say to the CEO, and what are the sort of things that you should not say to the CEO? And so what we've got today is we've got a panel of 3 people, one of whom has not joined yet. Bob Turek is, well, I sent out his details, so I'm not going to read to you what you've already hopefully read. But Bob has got rich experience, very experienced at the C-suite level, at the CEO level. David Schaffer, likewise, also very experienced at that level. And as I said, Jonathan Cousins is supposed to be joining us, but seems like something's happened there. So I'm gonna kick off, and I'm gonna ask Bob just for 2 or 3 minutes to talk to the subject. How do you engage? How does somebody as a practitioner who's come in at some level in the organization and realizes this is an ERP or a big CRM or whatever, and it needs CEO custody? What do you do as a practitioner to open the door to having a conversation with the CEO? And once you manage to get 5 minutes of time with the CEO, what do you say to the CEO? So, Bob, if you'd like to just kick off with a couple of minutes then, and we'll go through with Dave. Ted, looks like Jonathan's not going to join us. Could you step in and stand in for that, please?
Okay.
So Ted also has rich experience. We decided to keep the panel small. That's the only reason why Ted's not on the panel in the first place. Ted is the vice president of IBSP. And so, Bob, over to you.
Okay. Yeah, most of my experience is with smaller companies where it's easier, as you probably all know, it's easier to get into a CEO level. In fact, a very small company may not have a CIO, right? They got an IT manager, or they got managed services or something like that. So that's most of my experience. However, other ways, I guess James had set up kind of a 2-parter. How do you get the meeting? And then what do you say in the meeting, right? And what do you not say? And getting the meeting with a larger company, I was working with a company that has, they had a unique value proposition around group technology for manufacturers, which drastically cut the costs of sourcing, parts and all that. And so what we would do as salespeople, and I'm a sales guy, not a consultant, as many of you are, and you have to sell. We would generally enter at the CIO level and then get sponsored up. So how you get sponsored up is to start talking about, I guess, a couple ways. Dealing with budgets, and that may have to involve a CEO, and then also dealing with issues that involve the CEO. And I think James has done quite a bit in terms of defining what the CEO is more interested in, and this idea of he's really the only guy, he or she is really the only person that can understand the entire business and maybe respond to a situation where the ERP system's been looked at as just technology and maybe a burden on the business, an operational burden, and he really wants to get something out of that business system. Now, so that's a little bit about gaining access. Now, once you get in, my view is that the CEO doesn't have any interest in you, your company, or your software. They want to have a valuable conversation, a high value conversation. And my belief is the way to do that is to focus on their developing their problem and their awareness of it. If it's around business systems, it would be a conversation that says, ask some key questions and then have a intelligent, valuable discussion around them. And I think a key question might be, how do you view your ERP system? Is it as a technology or is it as a business driver? How do you view it? And then another one related to that is it an operational burden? Do you see it as kind of a pain in the butt, which I think most people view ERP as, or do you view it as something where you could actually manage it in a way that gives you a competitive advantage in your business? So I think those kinds of conversations are high value. And I think you have to be ready to be maybe only have a 10, 15-minute conversation that could go into a 30-minute conversation, but be ready to have a short conversation.
I think the thing is to get I would say if you haven't got the CEO's attention in 5 minutes, you've lost the meeting.
Exactly. Fantastic point. They're going to look at you, and I mean, most CEOs, you ask them for a meeting and say, well, you better be extremely valuable to me, or you're not going to be in the office very long.
No.
So I've had CEOs say that,
Right. Yeah, no, it can happen. David, your thoughts?
So a couple of things. Much like Bob, a lot of my focus, I'm going to put it in two different categories. In prior life, having been a managing director and senior individual for two major CPA firms that are dealing with larger corporations, the entry there was clearly through the relationship in the accounting environment, building relationships with trusted advisors. And I bring that up because that holds true. I'm going to label it as Bob did, SMB, small, medium business. And let me put a little clarification there. Small, medium business does not necessarily mean that they do just a few $1 million in sales. It typically, from my definition, means that the decision maker is part of a privately owned organization or through a private equity firm that owns that organization. It's not publicly traded. So let's go to the larger corporations first, where you're trying to get in the door. If that is a larger organization, they typically will have external accounting, legal support, and I think it's important to do research on that company if it's a target you're going after. Understand that company, understand its mission, understand its values, really do a study of it. Find out who is in their trusted advisor circle, and that's easy to do if you just reach out and touch base with that organization. So, for example, you may want to talk to a CEO. However, typically they have internal accounting, for example. That's a wonderful place to start, and just use that as an introduction. Say, I've been working with organizations in your vicinity. I understand that industry. I'd love an opportunity just to get to know you, not selling anything, just to get to know you. And if you have references that you can refer to, you can say, for example, recently I was working with ABC Company. It appeared they were being positioned for a potential resell, or they were looking at an ERP system. I'd love to just touch base with you and get a feeling and understanding of where you are. I would do that with the small, medium business as well. Find out who they're involved with. Look up that individual on LinkedIn who's the CEO in a small business. See who they are connected to. Reach out to those connections and say, hey, Mr. CEO, I noticed you're connected to Bob Turek on LinkedIn. I've known Bob for several years. We've worked together. Is there an opportunity for me to get to know you as well? Don't go in with an idea that you have a solution looking for a problem, because that's going to fail. It truly is getting to know and to network. Once you get in the door, and again, hopefully that helps a little bit. The old days, many, many, many moons ago, when I first moved to the United States and I was with IBM, we literally knocked on doors with business cards. Hi, I'm walking around the territory, just want to get to know you. Obviously, those days are pretty difficult to do today. So you do it online through LinkedIn, relationships. Just find some way to at least just introduce yourself and know that network. Once you're in, my experience has been, particularly in the SMB environment, the number one issue that key owners, key executives have is really twofold. Number one, it's always a matter of balancing cash flow. So there needs to be an understanding that cash is probably going to be of a limitation. And if they view you as an expense, you're not going to get very far. You need to be a value proposition. So how do you do that? You really go in to that meeting and say that I have no agenda. I have worked closely with organizations similar to yours. In my case, having been a Vistage chair, it's very easy to say that I've understood multiple executives who believe that their employees think they have the solutions to everything, yet you go home at night and you worry. So what I'd like to really understand is from you as an individual, as a CEO, and this could be for any C-level executive, what specifically are you looking to achieve within your organization? If I could hand you my proverbial magic wand, what would that magic wand tell me this organization should look like in a year from now? I said the first thing they concerned about is cash flow. The second thing is that many, many, many CEOs, C-level executives are busy working in the business as opposed to on the business. They are so accustomed to having developed this business over time, integrated. Even in a larger organization, they've been promoted from within the organization. Having done marvelous work within the organization doesn't necessarily equate to being a wonderful C-level executive. They were good at what they did. An example, when I worked for the CPA firms as a consultant, part of the consultant arm, we had tax consultants who were CPAs, who were marvelous tax people. And because they did so much revenue in the tax, they got promoted to being a partner. And then they found out as a partner, they needed to develop business. Well, they don't have the skill. They have the skill in doing tax. So similarly, my parallel is when you meet with an executive, they may have been promoted, they may be the founder, they're accustomed to working in the business. To give them an opportunity to discuss with you, if the world was perfect, where would they like to spend their time? Where do they see the future going? Just listen. And then if you can provide ways of helping them achieve those goals, whether it's ERP, whether it's business process improvement, whether it's networking them with other people, that will help you gain credibility. Then you become an advisor to that executive. You have to become part of a trusted advisor for them to truly understand how you can help them. So those are some initial thoughts, James, as to hopefully
Thanks,
it
David.
helps.
Thank you, David. Ted, your thoughts? You muted.
Ted, turn your mic on.
Okay, so Zoom actually likes it when I'm muted. So that's
The recording's a bit quiet though when you did that.
okay. So I'm going to come at it from a little bit different perspective. My perspective is, company has said, okay, James or Ted, we want to hire you to help us with an ERP selection or an ERP implementation. And maybe it's the IT person that's reached out, or the CFO. And the question then becomes, how do you get to the CEO to get them involved? So my first meeting is always with the executive team. And that meeting is a workshop to identify where the company wants to be in 3 years and what they need to do to get there. My purpose for that is I want to make sure any decisions I make align with the direction for the company. So that's what I tell them is I need to make sure that I'm going to be in alignment with what you want to accomplish in the direction you're taking the company in. So that gets me in front of all of the executives. And once we've established, here's where they want to be, then the thing is, what are your limits to growth? Maybe they've identified the current system doesn't have the capabilities that they need. And that the capabilities they need require, a new system. So at that point, it's all about anything we're doing downstream of that has to tie back to those business goals. So at that point, the CEO's invested in it because they want to make sure they get those business goals. So I'm involving them from there on in all the decision making. I don't know. Does that help?
Yeah, thanks, Ted. That's good. So we've said, what should you do to get in front of the CEO? What should you not do if you want to get in front of the CEO? What is absolutely the worst thing you can do if you're trying to get in front of the CEO? Let's go around the room. Bob, your thoughts.
I think David hit on it really well. Don't lead with your solution, whether it's your consulting capabilities, software in particular. Big error most salespeople do is they start talking features and try to educate the client on all their special verbiage that they've defined all these great features with. And I think the key is to focus on the problem, a discussion of what they believe the problem is, but guide them, obviously in a direction of the topic, if it's ERP or whatever it might be. And then be prepared to say discuss the value of solving the problem. That's so key, and I think there's a lot of ways to do that. Missed opportunities, mistakes that were made, especially with ERP systems. You can start dollarizing this stuff pretty quickly and gain agreement again on the problem and then the value of solving the problem. Don't even talk about the solution.
Great. David, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think the real key, Bob just touched on, you don't have solutions. Got to recognize that the individual you're talking to has achieved or attained a level within their organization that is rather unique. Um, no matter what size the organization is, there is only one CEO.
Mm.
And I think to go in and pretend that you understand what that individual is going through is probably a major mistake because you really don't. To that end, I think it is important to not go in there and say, boy, I can really relate and understand what you're going through, because they're going to look at you and say, I may have kids that are similar in age to you or grandkids, and they don't know what the hell I do on a daily basis. So who the hell are you to tell me that you understand? I think it's a situation of going in and not presenting solutions, but really saying that if it's uncomfortable, put yourself in the third party. I've had relationships with other individuals who I believe are in similar situations to where you might be. And what that situation is, I have not a clue. I'm only in here to truly understand, if that world was perfect, where do you see your organization going? It's interesting, just as a sidebar, my son spent a lot of time, he played collegiate soccer, and then in his spare time was coaching soccer. And one of the heads of that organization, the soccer league, which was a very prominent one, came back and said that the role of a coach and an advisor is to help the individuals achieve their potential, which they can't achieve on their own. So I think when we're having the meeting, it's important to use third-party reference to listen, and don't go in with a solution, but say rather, I'm here, I may or may not be able to assist you, but I truly would like to understand where you see your company going. And again, avoid solutions. On the ERP side, I have yet to see a sales rep go in and say, my software isn't the best thing since sliced bread. So let me be honest with you and show you the areas that my software doesn't work. I mean, they're not going to be a salesman for too long. So they're going to try to dovetail to their solution. We don't have a solution. We're in there to provide whatever guidance we can do. And if we can't provide that guidance, we may know someone who can. So don't go in with solutions.
Right. Ted, your thoughts?
Mine are going to echo what everybody just said. I found out the hard way is you don't go and say to somebody, I've helped others in your industry, and I would just want to come and talk about what we've done for them, because they're like, I don't really care what you did for them. What are you going to do for me? So I'm echoing what David and Bob said. I think that's the biggest thing is you're there to help them solve a problem, and you need to understand that. So it's just a case of don't tell them, here are all the things I've done, and don't talk about yourself too. Sorry. I'm going to emphasize that. I've been in vendor presentations where at the end of it, when they leave, the CEO goes, they really spoke, they talked about their, how much they value the customer. And yet the first 30 minutes was all about them. They didn't ask anything about me.
That all about term is great. It's all about you, Mr. CEO. That's the attitude you got going.
I think also we all have, we go in thinking that the value proposition is one of helping the organization grow, helping the organization do something financially, when the value proposition may not even lie in that area. There are a significant number of clients I have worked with where the value proposition isn't growing the value relative to dollars to the company, because they already have several homes, they already have a boat, they're happy. The value proposition is, how can you help me to develop a succession plan so I can go out and enjoy what I've built. That may be the value proposition. And the only way you're going to understand and learn the value proposition is to not make an assumption that the only way to create value is through financial growth. It is to help the executive, the owner, the CEO achieve what he or she perceives to be or understands to be the value proposition. And how can you help me achieve that? It may very well be that the implementation of an ERP system is one that allows me to no longer have to manage the inventory on my own, manage the payables, manage the cash flow. If I put in a system that the value proposition isn't to produce a whole bunch of spreadsheets or AI in today's generation, it's really to allow me to get out of the day-to-day operation and position myself to enjoy what I've built. So you only get that through building trust, building communication. And again, I'll go back to the trusted advisors. If there is a team of trusted advisors, understand from them where you can help to let the CEO meet their objectives.
Right. Thanks, David. I think
If
let's
I could just
carry
Can I
on.
just
Tim.
echo something that David said, which is interesting because I've been working with somebody who did a lot of work with CEOs. That was his big focus, was CEOs in small businesses and particularly family-run businesses. And he brought me in on one account, and the CEO said, my wife said she's going to divorce me if I miss one more of my daughter's, birthdays. So I need to figure out how I'm going to, get out of running everything day to day and make it to her next birthday. Like that was his goal.
Very true. Very true. I had a very similar situation where husband and wife were very much involved. This is what I call SMB, small medium, about $28-30 million a year in sales, headquartered out of New Jersey, second home in Colorado. The second home in Colorado was where their children lived. And the wife, they were equal owners of the business. He ran the operations, she ran the accounting and the finance. And much like Ted said, they had their first grandchild and said, I'm going to see my grandchild. You got a choice. You can figure out how the heck to get out of this business and go see your grandchild, but I'm going. And that became the foundation, interestingly enough, for implementing a new system that allowed both of them from a remote position to monitor and manage the business and elevate the individuals through the implementation of the ERP system. We actually guided and coached the COO to take over as the new interim president. To make a very long story short, as we built trust and got to know each other, the number one thing that the male side of the ownership wanted to do, he wanted to learn how to fly an airplane. And believe it or not, that was part of his value proposition. There is a little bit of humor behind that. Not only did he learn to fly the airplane, not only did they extricate themselves from the business, but the wife said, I'm going to Colorado and it'll be over my dead body that I get in a plane with you to fly to Colorado. So he flew on his own to Colorado, but they both achieved their goals. Ultimately, the long term was they both got so settled in Colorado that they called me up and said, Dave, I think our next step is we'd love to approach ABC Company, who's expressed interest in buying our company. Can you help coach me through selling my company? When the initial letter of understanding came in, the letter of understanding was such that the earned out value of that sale was going to be over a 3-year period. And during that 3-year period, my contacts, the client I've been dealing with, would be involved in the company over 3 years to earn out the rest of the sale of the business. We squashed that immediately because we just extricated them from the business, and here they were getting thrown back in. Long story short, they ultimately ended up selling under very different terms. I bring that up because not that I'm great and walk on water, because I don't, but all of this came from a relationship. it started with some ERP discussions, but it evolved to so much more. And you become that trusted advisor. As that trusted advisor, they'll rely upon you to help them, whether it's with ERP or other decisions. And you may not have all the answers, but you certainly have a network that you can reach out to.
Great, thanks. Let's throw this open to the floor. Anybody on the call who has questions, comments, thoughts? Go around the room.
I've got a question really, and I think it was one of Bob mentioned it early on. I think it was saying that if in this world of business systems and ERP related activity that we're focusing on, oftentimes you're either accessing the organization through the IT director or the CIO, yeah, or you want to start that conversation at a more senior level, but you get deflected off to, well, that's systems,
Right.
so go talk to the IT guy. I just wondered whether anybody's got any practical hints, tips, guidance. I know it's very individual, but if James, you're quite adamant on the CEO needing to have custodianship, and I think we all realise that and appreciate that. But what happens if the CEO doesn't? It wants to pass you off, and practical tips of how do you therefore get back up without either ruining your relationship with the CIO,
Right,
who's acting as a gatekeeper, or just being able to get the CEOs on board with stuff.
Anybody on the panel like to comment on that?
I'm still thinking. Are you still saying? Are you thinking, Brian, that you're actually talking to him, and he's saying, he or she is saying, I'm just. Why don't you go talk to my CIO? You're an ERP guy, and that's what he does.
Pretty much. I mean, there's a bit
But
of
if that's the case,
or there's the other thing is, which is sort of, you don't even get. You don't get that. I'm playing devil's advocate because it just, you immediately get, well, if you want to talk about that, then go talk to these people, not to me.
Or you're talking to a gatekeeper in front of the CEO, whatever it might be. Yeah, and again, I would first fight back a little bit and say, I love the question, how do you view your ERP system? Is it as an operational burden? And just kind of wait and listen and see what is said. And another way of saying that is, do you view it just as technology? So you take a shot back, but get some kind of response to the key problem area you want to open up is what I'd say. But yeah, if you get deflected again, I suppose you got to start at that lower level and see if you can build up with the same idea. With that, I love the idea of CEO custodianship, just the whole idea of it. And you have to develop a very good problem definition, discussion. What is the value of solving that problem? And then the magic happens is when that CEO or that C-level or even the lower level says, well, how would you do that? And I think there's, you got to have in your hip pocket some of the methodology that you might go about doing. And I'm a big fan of doing a small project to prove out certain things first before the big project, seeing that happen and work well.
Okay,
So a couple of things on that, James. Number one, and I don't want it to sound terrible, but it's probably going to sound terrible. If there has been an opportunity to meet with a CEO and you get deflected over to the technology person, then you clearly have done a poor job in the initial meeting with the CEO, because they're just saying, you're here to talk technology. But let's pretend, or somehow you are with the CIO or CTO or IT manager or whatever. There's nothing wrong with that. So you meet with the IT manager and understand that the existence of the IT manager is to continue to grow information systems. They usually have charts all over their wall, and this is how it's working, and blah, blah, blah. They want to grow within the organization. So to use them as an alliance and say, hey, you know what? I don't have solutions. I'm not an IT systems person like you, but I believe that systems is the foundation of the growth of your organization. What specifically, as an IT director, manager, CIO, where do you see taking the company in the future, and what's standing in the way? Because maybe working together, we can come up with a plan that allows us to grow your organization, create value, because clearly there must be something you're looking to achieve. And make that person your alliance. Then when you get back to the CIO, let's say that person's name is Joe or Mary. Joe or Mary, we have met, and you know what? Collectively, we've come to a decision, Mr. CEO, Ms. CEO, that these systems need to evolve in the future, and we're ready to work together to help you achieve the goals of this organization. So it's not necessarily negative. How you got there may be negative, but once you're there, leverage it. Everything is a case of leverage.
Perhaps I could add a perspective to this.
Sure.
Look, really good what everybody's saying, but I think what hasn't been said is that there's no one approach that works for every situation. First of all, the approach you might take to getting the CEO involved as a sponsor of the project after you're in will be very different, right? You know, absolutely you want to talk to him at that point, understand his concerns and his drivers. And generally, when we implement a project, we find one or two things that he wants that maybe wasn't mentioned by whoever's driving the project, and we make sure we get it in there, just to kind of demonstrate that we're listening. But anyway, that conversation is a bit easier because you can often say, "Look, you know, we're involved in building this and that for you. I just wanted to say hello and touch base," and that gets you into that conversation. And I absolutely agree. Use that time to discover his wants. Now, the other kind of conversation is more of a sales conversation, which we've talked a lot about. In that situation, yeah, you're kind of going in cold. But if you're brought in by the IT manager or the CIO or the CFO, then you don't really want to go over their head to the CEO if you can accomplish what you need with the CIO. And I completely agree about a proof of concept, a smaller budget project to get started. And there we often try to find out, well, what the CIO or CFO or IT manager's problem is, then understand what his budget is, and then try to pitch a proof of concept. And if we can get his buy-in, then there is your opportunity to then go talk to the CEO, right? Because if he's ultimately the decision maker, you want to get to know him. Now, the other technique we use for this sort of thing that we've found particularly effective is long-term nurturing. If we know that there's a CEO or a CIO or CFO that we need to talk to or want to talk to, then we start commenting on his posts. We start, reading what he's saying. We start looking at what he's thinking or trying to understand what he's thinking. So at the very least, we can be prepared for that meeting when it comes, and we can speak to issues that he's raised himself. And that's all I have to say about that.
Thanks.
I'll just add 2 cents if I may.
Sure.
So I'm just going to start with put the sales side part aside, because as Christopher and everybody else has said, that's a bit of a different issue. But once I'm in the door, like I said, I'm always having an executive workshop. I always need to know where they want to be and what's going to take them to get there. And I'll give you just a simple example. So one client that hired me they said, Ted, we projected 125% growth over the next year. We've been growing for 100% for the past 4 years. And we now see it was footwear company. We see the catalog business taking off. We need to look at the warehouse layout. So I got involved, Monday morning we start talking about the planning. We start talking about, well, where do how are you going to get there? How are you plan to get to 125% growth? And determined that in order to achieve that, they would have to hire 30 salespeople starting tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. And the CEO just went like, shit, that's not happening, is it? Not like, no. So I don't think the warehouse is the problem anymore. You got a bigger problem. Like, you're not going to get the growth that you banked on. So I always come back to having that workshop is critical. The other part I'll say, though, is there are some situations in which maybe the CEO is not the right person, and you have to figure out who is. So a company I worked with, they set up a subsidiary to do business in Japan. They hired somebody who was Japanese to be the face of the company. But if you went to him and said anything about operations, his comment was, that's not my job. I go out and socialize with CEOs of Japanese companies. I talk to them. That's my job. And so now you have to figure out, well, then who is the right person in the organization? So I think that's another, challenge, is to figure out that part.
I think one of the points from my experience, and it speaks a lot to the way that I've marketed, which is around people who've got concerns with the ERPs, is that there is this big body of experience. I'm going to talk specifically ERP because that's my comfort zone. But there's this big body of experience, and you can search on any of the major search engines. 70% plus of ERP implementations don't deliver, and the majority of CEOs are at some level concerned about that. So that's a door opener to say to the CIO, the CTO, the CFO, whatever, as you're aware, there is this quite alarming statistic. And one of the things that I understand about that is that it's really important that the CEO is involved, and I would like to arrange a meeting with the CEO. When you meet with the CEO, it's basically the same introduction. Very aware of this. We're very aware that you are the custodian of the overall holistic integrated view of the business, and therefore we would really like to work with you in putting this whole thing together. So that's an angle that can work.
One of the scenarios that I've had where I've got engagement from a CEO really came about where they were looking for a PM to upgrade their ERP system. It was a big retail environment, about 35 stores, several thousand users, and it came about through really getting sponsorship. Really, the project sponsor was the CFO. And from my initial discussion with them, I was able to ask really for an input from the CEO, which I got an initial session with them. They were actually quite invested in and interested in the project. They understood what the benefits were going to be that they were going to get from the upgrade. And then what I did when I got into the project was I ensured that I got them onto the steering committee. So there was a regular monthly cadence then with the CEO involved, in the regular steering, and that really helped greatly in keeping the project going, keeping it on track, because he was able to then advocate on your behalf when the need arose. So that was my I suppose one experience I had in terms of getting that engagement.
Thanks, Morgan.
So that was a successful involvement of a CEO. It didn't really take a heck of a lot of time, and he was able to inject into the project what he wanted out of it from a company viewpoint. Is that the success you got there?
Sorry, I'm sorry, I missed out.
Oh, I was just saying that you got a CEO involved with minimal amounts, minimal time issues, just occasional, but they were able to inject into the project pretty clear needs and requirements from that system. And I suppose the CEO actually might have gotten excited about the fact that he was able to influence with not too much taken away from his normal, daily duties.
Yeah, but I think part of it was he understood the benefits of what the ERP, the upgraded ERP was going to give them, and he wanted those benefits. So he had a vested interest in trying to make sure that it happened and happened well.
Right.
Yeah. Right. So I think that was important, an important piece. You don't always get that level of engagement or interest at that level, but when you do, it certainly makes the project go a lot better.
Yeah, I think there's a fear of by CEOs of getting sucked into these technology projects somehow, and it sounds like you had a pretty good approach to it.
Yeah, well, I think the getting them onto an hourly steering meeting once a month, isn't too intrusive. So as a technique, it probably it isn't going to eat that much of their time, and they do get to then, see what's happening. So I think that approach can be of interest to them.
Yeah.
Right. Other comments? Steve Rogers.
I can talk about the times I've really messed this up, but less frequently about the times I've done it well. The only thing I can add to what's been said already is making sure that you respect the time of the chief executive. So I've been into meetings where they've asked me to take a 1-hour presentation and do it in 15 minutes. And I've made sure that I can do that. That tends to get their attention because you haven't blabbered on for too long. The second thing is to highlight the problem that you solve and not to pretend that you understand the client's problem, but these are the kinds of problems that you aim to solve. And you'd like to establish in as short a time as possible whether any of those are appropriate to the client situation. If they aren't, you get a very quick no, or you get delegated very quickly. If there's a yes, typically what happens in my experience is I get stopped. The person will say, hold on, just go back to what you just said about whatever it was. And then you find them focusing in to something. Now, even then, the danger is you open up a door into what we do. And so you've got to keep away from going into solution mode and to rather say, why is that a problem? Ask questions and probe as to why you stopped me on that particular point. What's going on? What's the pain in that point? And then to quickly look at your watch and say, right, listen, it's 15 minutes is up. Can we schedule a slightly longer session to explore that online or live at a time that suits you? And they might say, we can do that, but I'd like to involve another person, which is also fine. But so the two things, the time, respecting the time. Second of all, getting to a problem and finding something to attach to quite quickly. And number three, being succinct and to the point. And not making the mistake of starting to talk about brand or technology or solutions or worst case scenario, explaining how things work, because that is just generally irksome.
Right.
Right. Brian, any more thoughts from your side?
No, I'll hold it. Margot wants to chip in on the thing. If she's still there.
Margot, you still there? She's muted. So I think our time is nearly up. So let's go around the room and just wrap up. So starting the other way around, Ted, your sort of closing thoughts?
I guess so. There are two parts. One is the marketing sales side, and then the other is once you're in and the client's hired you to do something. From my perspective, I think doing business outlook session is critical. I mean, you need to put every effort in context of where they want to be in 3 years and what's it going to take to get there. So I think that's a crucial session that has to happen. And at that point, you've got the CEO involved.
Okay, thank you. David.
Yeah, I think the number one takeaway, most as we relate to ERP implementations, are going to take a long period of time. They don't happen overnight. And the one thing I would add is from a CEO perspective, we cannot create an environment where everyone assumes we as a coach, advisor, consultant are the solution. And over time, it gets pushed to us to solve, because then it becomes our solution rather than that of the company. So we need to always be in a position of turning it back to the key people within the organization to assume the responsibility and the accountability, never losing sight of what we're hoping to accomplish in the long term.
Great, thanks, David. And Bob?
Yeah, I think we talked a lot about avoiding solution, but if you've really done a good job with the problem discussion and the value of solving some of those problems, and the CEO might be asking you, which has happened to me, especially in selling this group technology thing. Okay, great. I think you might be able to save me some money. What's the next step? What should we do? And you got to be ready with a proposed solution, whether it's a small project to kind of kick it off, to prove out a point, or whatever it might be. The other thing that I think is interesting, and I always, as a sales guy, I always think about this as a positive thing, is don't be afraid to qualify out. If there's just not a path here and they're not responding to what you do, hey, just let it go and go on to the next deal or the situation that'll actually pay off for you.
Okay, great. Margo, if do you have any comments or questions before we close?
No, I think that's been a good session. It's a very interesting point made.
Good, thanks, Morgan. Margo, you're muted.
I appreciate it. I didn't introduce myself earlier. And why am I here? I've known James and have worked on other projects with James for about 8 years. We did an organization vitality assessment, developed a software that enabled us to go organization-wide instead of going around seeing what's the vitality and stagnation in an organization. How do we do the whole organization at once, come back really quickly with a first view, let you see what's going on, and bring that immediately to the CEO so they see that we bring them immediate value, and then have a conversation from there. So that's how I know James. And since then, we launched the small business in 2020. Of course, the pandemic came. That was fun. And now we're back in. We've expanded and deepened it. It's called Beyond Resilience, and the key product services is Vitality Leadership Solutions, Vitality with a Vitality Leadership System, which identifies one of the key things that we understand, and particularly now, is it's hard to keep employees. The retaining of employees is going to be even more important. You say AI, but that's also going to accelerate them leaving an organization. So your turnover and your talent and your wisdom is going to get worse and worse really quickly. And the more they switch companies, the less loyalty they're going to have. So that whole thing is kind of a mess. And so what we have is a Vitality Leadership System that has gears in it, we identified the things that encourage people to leave out of an organization. And they're missing operational pieces, interestingly enough. They're operations things. That's not, and so we created gears in a system. We identified KPIs with each of those. When you implement it, we roll it back up and roll it up to the ERP.
Okay, thanks very much. I think we need
Well,
to do wrap up.
That's why I'm here, because I wanted to listen, and I'm very glad, in case you're, I'm just glad, and a lot of information, and so I have lots of questions and observations.
Right, folks, we're just about on time. Thank you all for your input. Ted, Bob, David, a lot of wisdom there. Thanks to the rest of the panel. And I think that what I see out of this discussion is, yes, it's a challenging topic. There's no simple, surefire way of getting into the CEO's office, and there's no surefire way of getting the CEO's attention. What is clearly apparent is going in and talking about your solution and your software and your whatever and your whatever and your whatever is not the way to do it. You've got to really touch on their pain points, touch on their aspirations, and listen. That came out from a couple of people. There's that old saying, you've got 2 ears and 1 mouth, so you should listen twice as much as you speak. I think in the case of when you're talking to the CEO, you probably need to listen 5 times as much as you speak.
That's right.
I think one of the lessons that I've learned over the years, I've always in school been in the habit of taking notes. I write very fast and very accurately, and I've always been a note taker. And many, many years ago, I discovered a lot of the engagements I do, I start off with a 1-hour one-on-one interview with the CEO where I ask them, what's the essence of your business and how does it thrive? What are your critical concerns with regard to whatever? And what are your critical success factors for this project? How will I know I've succeeded at the end of the project? And those 3 questions can take an hour to get an answer. But what I found interestingly with C-suite executives is they're not used to being listened to. And if you sit there and take copious notes, they will tell you things that are quite mind-boggling. I once interviewed a series of executives. The company had just been bought out. They'd put in an expatriate CEO called Dave. And 3 of the I'm interviewing them. I'm taking notes, and they say the problem with Dave is he's an expat. He can get on a plane and go home if this all goes for. And they're telling me their sort of deepest, darkest secrets because I'm listening. And you can learn a huge amount by asking very simple questions, listening very attentively, and then active listening and feeding back. So that's my 2 pence worth. Folks, we're on time. If anybody'd like to stay on and just have general chat with any of the other delegates, please feel free to do so, and I can set up a couple of meeting rooms in Zoom, just for one-on-ones. And if you will want to drop off now, that's fine. This is the scheduled time.
Nice to meet everyone.
Thank
You too, Margot.
Nice meeting you too.
Thanks, everybody. I've got another meeting coming up at 7.
Thanks, Steve.
That's a good time. Yes. So nice to see you all, and we'll talk
You too,
again.
Steve.
Cheers.
Thanks.
Take
Yeah,
care.
likewise. Thank you very much. Bye.
Thanks, guys. Cheers.
So, your thoughts on how it went?
I think a lot of
David?
good points were made. I appreciated the conversation. Conversations like this are fantastic as long as you can have them fairly focused, right? And they don't go off the rails in terms of topic areas, because there's so much experience and wisdom in the room. So they're extremely valuable just to have them.
Right. David, thoughts?
Yeah, I think it was interesting conversation, if nothing else, for all of us to get to know each other a little bit better as well. It's funny, your closing comment, I think it was Mark Twain that said, knowledge is what is gained when you listen when you'd rather be speaking. And I think that's what you
Sounds like a
just
Twain.
touched. Yeah, it
Sounds like a
does.
Twain, for sure.
But I think it's good. It would be nice to have, and I know this would be a challenge, is to have a similar roundtable somehow on the value associated with the organization, and have CEOs attending or C-level people attending a roundtable which focuses on our organization and the experience that this organization brings to the table, because that may open up some doors for opportunity as well.
Sure. Okay. Ted, your thoughts?
I thought it was a good session, like David's thought, but it's interesting that I think we've encountered the same thing. So obviously there are some commonalities across, everybody's experience. So that was interesting.
Right. Gentlemen, I think we're complete. Thank you all so much. And I will top and tail the recording and make that available later today, and then Zoom transcript and summary. And
is this the first panel that we've done with IBSP?
This is the third session that we've run. It's the first time we've run it as a panel. The previous two were basically presentations.
Yeah, I like the panel format a lot. That's great. Okay. Great. Sounds great. Gents. Thank you, guys.
Thanks so much.
You guys have a good one. Take care, everyone.
Take care.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.